another episode of Two Tins Talking Trash. We're two Tins, we're going to talk trash. Today, we're going to talk about the Sloppy Steve.
Yeah, we had the Bannon, Sloppy Steve, Sloppy Steve.
Bannon, Sloppy Steve.
We're getting there with our Trump impressions. We got to kind of, work on it in concert, get that shit on point.
Friend of the show, Steve Bannon. We're going to be talking about the massive Sloppy Steve swamp monster.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about the history and kind of what he's done before the Trump administration, and then after, once he got fired or quit. We don't know yet. Anywho, Sloppy Steve was born sloppy. The kids called him Sloppy in elementary school. That'd be great though. Somebody connected the two. Anyways, so he was kind of born to a middle class family, Dixiecrats,
All American
Dixiecrats. From the good old state of Virginia.
Yeah, just remember, Dixiecrats are different to the Democrats of today. Like, they weren't necessarily like our friend or your friend, progressive folk. Just bear that in mind.
No, absolutely. Very different brand.
Southern strategy.
Which only means one thing. He was very, very all-American. White.
Yeah.
So, he ended up going... He has a pretty interesting education background if you look into it. He has like a MBA from Harvard.
Nice.
He served in the Navy. He just he was on a ship that went to the Persian Gulf. During the Iran hostage crisis, that whole ordeal.
But he ain't getting no combat. He ain't really getting a static.
No, of course not.
Despite for somebody who seems as bloodthirsty and as war-loving as he is,
yes.
When has he has, is the typical picture a lot of the time with these dudes.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it,
he is one of these like warlords or gods of war, I suppose you would call them, that are just like so bloodthirsty and so like down for global destruction through conflict type of thing.
Yeah.
He has that idea that politics is war is one of his mantras that he used when he got into politics. Earlier on, so after the military, he went into investment banking for Goldman Sachs.
Yep.
Moved up the ranks.
Harvard elite, worked with Goldman Sachs, dissing the other
Absolutely.
Harvard elites as you do, It's the only way.
Mm-hmm. Making money for your rich friends. It turned out good for him. He started a boutique investment firm. Invested in really random stuff. He got not random, but some of the things
Unexpected.
There was some unexpected things on the list. One of them being that they have the company has a stake in Seinfeld episodes.
Of course, yeah, that's the one that we always hear about.
No, yeah, that's like one of the pretty common oddball stories about Steve Bannon is he has a stake in Seinfeld. Huh.
Yeah.
What a weirdo.
Yeah, you have
who does that?
Yeah, people such as Bannon and Trump who like to point the finger at Hollywood elites and pick them apart along with their supporters, not realizing that Trump and Bannon to some degree or another are part of the Hollywood elite themselves, or would like to be. They kind of tried. They arguably tried, but never really kind of got in or blended. Trump would bitch about when he didn't win an Emmy. Just bear that in mind when you think about these guys, and the next time you want to throw dirt in the direction of Hollywood.
Oh, and Bannon was definitely so. After all of this and this investment stuff, he tried getting into Hollywood through documentaries. Later on, he found success getting the dish out on the Clintons, on the Clinton Foundation, and during the 2016 elections. But even earlier than that, it was just anti-democrat, exposés and stuff. He did one on Sarah Palin.
Yeah, I think that kind of put him on the map initially when it came to filmmaking and politics.
Oh, of course, like that he's some like this political giant who can expose the world to people like Sarah Palin, and he's the man behind the curtain is what people got the opinion of, that he might be like
the puppeteer,
or that like he could be an influencer. I think is the more conservative way of putting it, is that he would be a influencer for politics, at least on the right, and he was really doing that at the time. Like he was working at Breitbart, which was having trouble financially. It was right before Obama. So, it was having some financial difficulties, and it was just like losing viewers. But then Robert Mercer, a crazy hedge fund millionaire who also supported Trump.
Billionaire, I think.
Like, nobody knows how rich he is. So he's probably like a quadrillionaire, and nobody would actually know. So he invested a lot of money in Breitbart. It kind of like got friendly with Bannon, kind of just to voice Mercer's ideas. Like he would be the mouthpiece to this shadowy billionaire, trillionaire, whoever. So it also at this time was the birth of the Tea Party, which was an astroturf movement funded by a lot of these billionaire types to perpetuate these economic policies, tax cuts for the rich, and then like they would talk about some random social issue that would get the masses wild up, like gun control. They would just be like, the liberals are coming for your guns, so we need to cut taxes for the rich.
So like, in essence, it almost seems like for a large part of his life, he's been dedicating his life to, to acting and working as a proponent for his particular like set of ideals and beliefs. And then, once Obama came along, it arguably like, helped act as the catalyst for, not necessarily immediately then, but eventually what would become the movement that, he termed as the alt-right, wouldn't you say?
Right. So I kind of missed this on the timeline when we were talking about Sarah Palin's documentary, but that was during the 2008 election when Sarah Palin was the vice presidential nominee. And she was kind of like this.
Remember that. Just listen to that again. The lady who who's on some bloody reality show right now, has like her daughter's a baby mama, like
oh gosh, that family.
She's like she tried to pull up on a couple guys. I swear she's like gotten in a few altercations, and she's in beef deep with a couple people, like her ex-husband and shit. This was at one point the person who was considered as the vice presidential nominee for the Republican Party. Bear that in mind.
She was more
shows
than
you
that,
where
though.
we are.
She was more than a vice presidential candidate. She was supposed to be like the representative of real America.
Soccer moms who wear lipstick.
Yeah. She was essentially the mother of the Tea Party movement, or just
very true.
This kind of, I wouldn't even call the general movement the Tea Party movement. Bannon just refers to it as the movement.
Yeah,
kind of more like a bowel movement. But
and it's crazy because you think of it, like you look back at those times, and at one point, this same lady, was fixing to be president.
Absolutely,
like real talk. Like I thought about it myself in terms of come 2012 Republican elections, she's gonna take the nomination. Like she even put out like an autobiography. She was there canvassing for the Tea Party. Like all of the steps were in place for her to go and run for that. And it was almost like maybe that was, for Steve Bannon, maybe Sarah Palin was like the prototype for then what came to be Trump.
Right. No, exactly. Like, she was kind of the testing grounds, because he had never supported a candidate like that on such a huge scale. You know, he went all out with the documentary, and a lot of like the Breitbart articles backed it up. So the funding issues as well were before this. So, you know, a lot of people who worked at Breitbart at the time said that it became a lot more fringe during that time when Mercer money started becoming infused in it.
Yeah.
So anyway, with the Palin campaign, you know, he really saw this type of candidate that he could use for his movement. You know, this like populist, charismatic person. Honestly, though, he lost all hope in her.
Well, I guess she
good reason.
She killed the hope, man. She just she got herself in the shit.
Like, as much as
so many
we
scandals.
Don't like Trump, as much as we don't think that he's articulate, he's at least functioning to some level.
Yeah.
He's so full of shit that it's just so easy for him to spew it out. But with Palin, you could tell that she just like didn't know what she was talking about.
Nope, no.
It's like that Katie Couric thing.
Yeah.
Like, so what newspapers do you read? Just all of them.
All of them.
All of them. Just.
and of course the different scandals, the reality TV show. Like, if you actually look at her like dirt sheet, her track record, damn it, man, she's not. You know, it's difficult to actually think that this person was once a politician, like the governor of Alaska at that. You know, so that I think definitely just like
did
a lot to kill her legitimacy. Oh no, man! She was
from the Alaskan governor. I don't know.
She was heavy deep in some shit, man. Like, she was like different altercations and beef and fights, like almost street level, like almost thuggery, as I like to call it.
Oh man, her family, like, they just got into like serious. It's just like trailer park problems that people would go on Jerry Spring about. Her son-in-law gets arrested for domestic violence once a year.
Yeah, no, this is that crap. This is that Duck Dynasty, Sons of Anarchy, like half Breaking Bad shit right there, like the drama there. You know,
I mean, I didn't hear that part, but I just heard about her just like white trash bullshit.
Oh no, it was that like white boy drama, you know. I mean, that guy, I don't know. Like, I said like Duck Dynasty / maybe not so much Sons of Anarchy. That's some hardcore. That's drama everywhere. You don't want to be knee deep in that shit, but like
some gang shit. But
but there's some like Duck Dynasty shit, you know, or at least they're the Duck.
Somebody's not worshiping God 4 times a day or whatever.
But, you know, talking about these different things, like, you know, we think of Steve Bannon, and he seems to be somebody, you speak to him, and you can say a lot of things about him, but one thing you can't say is that he's not in tune with his base and what is going on and what is in their heads. This is something that he has his 10,000 hours in. This shit, he is in touch with it, is intuitive to him, and he is a man on a mission. And I think that mission is, you know, in his words, to save the West or bring it back.
Yes, yeah. So his big thing is like the West is heading into a like final battle that'll decide the future of humanity with Islam, and we'll get into more about Islam later, but you can kind of see this guy's psyche about how he's thinking in this like nefarious type of way. That's deeply rooted in his ideology, and his base 100% supports it. They might like have not arrived at that same conclusion, but when they heard it, they were just like, yes, that's right, we're doing that, and the best way to solve it is to give tax cuts to the rich. That's the only way that we'll fight Islam.
And you know, you first saw it in America where, you know, Obama and Democrats, the Democratic Party came up and found themselves in power, and then it was this situation of, you know, America is at the threat of socialism, entitlements, feminism,
of course.
You know, homosexuality, you know, the permissiveness of society. You know, it's kind of going back to like that kind of like Nixonian sort of conservatism, but it's like just sort of like ramped up a bit, and all these different like boogeymen, and like he, along with his media platform in Breitbart, helped to kind of propel that onto a national stage, and do his own bit to help make Trump that bit more palatable and accepting to the masses. Then lo and behold, we are at the point we are now, where some people say, it's arguably like mission accomplished for him, in terms of he has, someone such as Trump in power, who is, instituted what is a de facto Muslim ban, is clamping down hard, not only on illegal immigration, but legal immigration.
The Chinese threat.
There's the Chinese threat, there's that also. And these were all different things that, if you look at Bannon's track record, he's been talking on for the longest of times. Absolutely. And how things need to be done, and now they're being done. So that's how, like, it's like first step check, arguably. I don't know.
And he saw Trump as like this vessel for all of these ideas. Trump was kind of all about that. Even when he was making his first presidential run in the '80s, was talking about immigrants. But he really didn't know about all of these other complex global issues that he could weaponize. That was kind of just put into his head by people like Stephen Miller and, of course, Steve Bannon. The Steves. What's up with
Steve's
douchey white guy's named Steve? What's up with that?
The sloppy and snaky Steves. That's what I see of them. Sloppy Steve Bannon, snaky Stephen Miller.
Swampy.
Definitely.
That guy's swampy.
Swampy brings it to that, man. Fucking looks like a prop out of the Dracula film, man. That motherfucker looks like Dracula. Miller,
he got the hairline too.
Yeah, definitely, man. That guy, I don't know. He probably, if he's married, it's through an arranged marriage. That dude. Yeah. Anyway,
through a curse, through a family curse. So, like, Stephen Miller is still in there. Obviously, he's spewing this like weird anti-Chinese crap nowadays.
Anti-Chinese, anti-Hispanic. You hear that story about how when he was a kid, he told friend of his that I can't be friends with you because you're Mexican, or something ridiculous like that.
And this is Trump's speechwriter now.
Yep.
These guys combined just like know their base too well, and I think that's what's important to know about Steve Bannon is he does know who he's talking to, and he knows how to address them with like the correct amount of posturing and all the good words to say without coming off as what he truly is, which is a very despicably racist person.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, and that's the thing. And one thing that's also even scarier is that he's in tune with his base, and he knows how to address them. He knows what language to speak to them in. But not only that, he knows how to handle the mainstream media. In fact, over the last year, he has, it's almost like, 2017, everybody was posturing and, curious and wondering about this person who's, behind the curtain supposedly controlling Trump. And you couldn't get an interview with him. You barely heard him speak, heard his voice. And then out of nowhere, this year, he just kind of decides like, I want to talk now. And the moment he steps out and he starts engaging with the press, you just see everyone, all of the different like main TV shows and broadcasters like having him on. He was on the Bill Maher show recently, and not only does he have them in the palm of his hands in that sense, in terms of they want to get a quote from him, they want to be the one to have the interview with him, but he knows how to deal with them. Like I'm not a fan of the dude, but I can't deny the fact that he comes across as quite charming, articulate, and able to work a crowd.
Unfortunately, he knows the downfall of mainstream Western media, which is that all of these liberals are just looking for that gotcha. They're looking for that sound bite that they can use against, whoever it may be. And Steve Bannon knows how to get around it and to dress it up to make it like if you took out any soundbite on its own of that Steve Bannon interview, it wouldn't sound bad. If you played it back and it was just like, aha, we got him, everybody would be like, well, wait, you kind of don't. he kind of just danced around it, but in such like a graceful way, and you wouldn't expect this guy to be graceful at all. Like, he doesn't look like a graceful person. He just looks like a clumsy kind of bumbling idiot. It's just like, but no, like intellectually, he's great about dancing around that, and that's kind of like what he's honed in on. And now he's out of the White House. He's running wild across the world. Just setting fire to every Western democracy.
Yep, and speaking of that, we talk about how he's out of the White House, and this is something that like Tim and I spoke about before, and it's one that I guess is played in many other people's head. Is like, was Bannon fired or did he quit? Because I kind of felt like, from my perspective, when it was happening at the time, I know that it happened at around the time the Charleston incident happened.
It was a bit after that.
It was this.
Steve Bannon had this like
a month or so. It was the summer of 2017.
No, it was. So he called this reporter at the Washington Post or something.
Yeah.
And just started spewing about stuff, about just like
in response to that.
It was that, but it was a whole lot of other things. You know?
Like war with the administrative state, the mainstream media is the enemy. Anytime anybody calls me a racist, it's an award or some shit like that.
Oh yeah, he was just going off the rails.
Yeah,
and so it gives credence to the fact that he might have been fired by Trump just to like cover his end, to cover the publicity and the spectacle end. A lot.
Yeah, and there was also the fact that he was talking about, I think, Korea. There was a comment he made about Korea where he said like, ultimately there's not much we can do surrounding a conflict with them, because if they were to if we're gonna set off a bomb in North Korea, it will affect South Korea, and then that affects us. And I think there was also that in terms of undermining what Trump was trying to go about with at the time.
No, right. Like he was actually, this was probably one of the more logical things he said, which was that like you can't bomb North Korea because Seoul will be decimated by artillery within like 40 minutes.
Yes.
And that was kind of the smart thing. But so the whole like Trump approach, at least on his base's end, was he was saying like, oh, we're just gonna bomb the shit out of them, and I'm gonna personally fist Kim Jong-un.
So he may have been fired for like those multiple reasons.
Yeah, because the messages aren't lining up between the administration and Bannon. Good reasons on both sides. Maybe it was on purpose. Who knows? Anyways,
but you could say that like there's some. So there's a possibility he could be fired. But part of me can't help but wonder, like, because I just saw it as, did he quit? Because I kind of it was the sort of thing where it was like, the alt-right has now become like somewhat mainstream, and then with the Charleston march and the incident that happened thereafter, it was the situation where you had all of these far right / fascist
these proto brown shirts,
like proponents out there marching and getting media attention, and then that incident happened, and Trump essentially went up on stage and went, there were bad people on both sides. He failed to openly disavow and condemn the fascist proponents or the people who committed that act, or arguably help kind of act as a catalyst for it. So I can imagine from Bannon's end, it's like, I've just gotten the president to go up there and fail to disavow and condemn far-right neo-Nazis. I just got the president to do that. I just got him to say there were good people on both sides. My job is done. You know what I mean? It's like, we are now at that point where it is happening. What else does he have left to do?
Yeah.
Arguably.
This is like his goal is to just, set that into motion.
Yeah.
Just the beginning stages of authoritarian fascism. You know, once this comes out, and now there are proto-brown shirts in the streets. You know, the Proud Boys were just out on a rampage. So, you know, like, Bannon's job is done, for sure.
Arguably, yeah.
So now he's gone to Europe, Brazil. He's doing all of this after. I can see what you're saying. So now, like, he's done with that. So now he's going to the UK, Poland, Hungary, these places where he can plant some more seeds of discontent.
Yeah, because it's that type of thing of like, there's what we want to believe. We want to believe that he got fired, he's finished, it was just a phase. We want to believe that, but the evidence is just suggesting the contrary, in the sense of he is now going out into Europe, and it's not just talk. Like, the dude is affecting change there, whether we like it or not. And for him to be able to just up and do that in that manner shows that he, you know, he's not any old person. There's some competency there, and he's not to be taken lightly. So I just don't believe he's the type of person where they're gonna fire him. He's gonna, as we say here in China, he's gonna fire them.
His tail wasn't between his legs when he went off to Europe or wherever.
Yeah, as the media like to make it out to be, we want to believe that because we want to believe, you know, he's finished, he's going down, because we don't want to comprehend and think about what happens if he were to succeed. But hey,
that's also helping him though, because he doesn't have the mainstream media focus on him.
Very good point.
He can go off to Brazil and shake hands with this freaking warmongering, anti-democracy fascist, you know, and nobody would care. It's pretty scary that he can do this now under the radar, because everybody just thinks that he's a loser. Meanwhile, you have the Bavarian state elections and the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, like a party that he's supporting, a very far-right fringe group, winning 11% stake in that assembly. The first time it's been elected to a legislature in Germany.
Yeah,
so
like a legislature to like win a legislative seat. Did they win a seat then?
Yes. I mean, I'm gonna guess so. You know.
Yeah, or like within that council or what have you.
Yeah. So it is in the national legislature.
Yep, and there's that type of thing of like, even like on that point of the AfD in Bavaria, an interesting point to take home is, you know, Bavaria is like a stronghold of Germany and German culture. So there's an air room. I can imagine the way that it's going to be marketed and played off in respect to that victory. It's also the founding place of the Nazi Party. I'm not trying to like, you know, raise fears or like get people scared, but it's just something to bear in mind. And it's like, you know, he's now in Europe and he's helping to act as almost like a, you know, first of all, like a kind of coordinator. He's helping, you know, through, I think it's the movement. That's what he calls it. It's coordinating all of these far-right movements across Europe to like work with each other and to be more effective with regards to like how they execute their political campaigns. In terms of, I heard the movement provides polling services along with like, you know, media exposure and other things, and then, you know, that in itself just kind of acts as like a stimulus to these parties and helping them get their exposure. And, you know, it's not talk anymore. They are like they're elected national leaders, like the president of Italy. I think the president of Italy and maybe the president of Hungary are like openly collaborating and working with his
absolutely,
like movement.
It's something that falls short of the left. You know, we're fighting our local battles or our national battles, but meanwhile this guy is taking it to the global scale. Which is, oh man, that's just a new level of to affect that much change worldwide for this cause is just, it's astounding, really.
It's worrying, man. It's scary. Like, I think we spoke about it before, and I remember when it happened, I sent you a picture of it, and I was like, this shit is serious. And it was when, maybe it was like half a year ago, and I saw him attending a talk or giving a speech with Marine Le Pen, the leader of the Front National, or the National Front Party in France. And, it's maybe it's going to be difficult for like Americans or, people who aren't from Europe to understand, but like for us within Europe, especially people of color, but I think just generally, the National Front is undoubtedly a far-right, racist party. It may have like toned down and watered down his stance since the daughter has like gotten in charge. But prior to that, like the father who founded the party, he had no qualms about like his policies and his views, and the things he said, they were a lot more racist and a lot more kind of unfiltered. And when you see him on stage, like whenever I see, National Front, the BNP, that's our equivalent to it in the UK, when it's almost like when African Americans or certain people see the Confederate flag, it kind of evokes to some degree a similar response when we think of the BNP and the National Front. It's like that is like whoa, we want to steer well clear of that. And now, she, to some extent, there was she was close to winning the election, last year, and now with Bannon collaborating with her and him openly doing that, who's to say what could come of that? And if she ever were to become the leader of France, for us in Europe, like that's no joke. That's a fucking scary situation. Because this is France. This is like arguably the second most powerful country in Europe. It's a powerful country all round, and that will change a lot of things. And that it's partially scary. And we see that he is really not wasting time and not posturing about what he wants to do in Europe in terms of like defend Western civilization, stop it from being, overrun by liberalism or whatever the enemy of the day is. Like it seems to be happening in a way.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier how the far right is changing its message, or at least how the Parti National is doing it in France, how they've kind of stepped down and changed their tone. I think that this is one of the big things that Bannon's doing, is because he's creating this packaged message for these leaders to recite, basically. That's very abstract and not like blatantly racist or what have you. It's more just like speaking in terms of economics or whatever.
Economic nationalism, that's what he calls it.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is kind of what's the word? It's kind of spoken about under this euphemism of nationalism, in the sense of and in a way, to some degree, there is some solid theory and like fact to that, in terms of like they're talking about nationalism in the sense of like, in Europe there has of course been the issue of the EU, and a lot of that is down to fears of immigration, but it's also partly down to national sovereignty. Absolutely. In the sense of like, if you look more into the EU and the way in which EU laws and regulations, you have to, as an EU member, comply to those. How the process in which those laws are made. And it's not only of the laws and the regulations, there's even things relating to like government spending, like your budget. Like as a member of the Euro, you're not allowed to run too large of a budget deficit. Like real talk.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but for that's quite, that's like going into domestic policy and what, affecting what how you can actually deliver on your manifesto. And, you've seen the cases such as Greece in particular, where it's shown the kind of like, I don't know, the way that the EU as an institution can arguably make or break or really prevent different countries from being sovereign. So there is that, and that again plays into the whole idea of nationalism. Then of course there's the issue of like immigration, as you know, highlighted recently with the massive immigrant wave that happened across Europe in like late 2016 and throughout late 2015 and throughout 2016. Yeah, and he's capitalizing on those misgivings to
he's hitting all the points really.
Yep.
The people can the base can identify with, but then politicians can weaponize and use in their campaigns. So like if there's a politician running in France and a base in Lithuania supports that platform, then they're bolstered because there's a common message being shared.
Yeah.
So they're mobilized even further and acting on it. It creates like this even wider network of people who are just like, yes, this French politician is saying this thing about this exact same scenario that's happening in this other country. You know, like we're emboldened now. This is like a entire European call to action.
Yep.
Which is dangerous. You know, we're talking about entire countries that are falling prey to the same type of rhetoric simply because there's like a common umbrella for them all to stand under.
Yep, exactly. You know, a lot of different countries, whether it's, you know, Hungary, Austria, Poland, Italy, just France to some degree, and, you know, many others. Sweden, something is going on here. And yeah, I guess it brings us on to our next point. So you just mentioned how these different issues can be weaponized in a way to kind of bring a call to action for the whole of Europe. It can bring about some unity and help materialize on that coordination that the movement is hoping to kind of enact. And yeah, it brings us on to our next point in terms of with Europe, and I think for Bannon in particular, there's this existential crisis surrounding, you know, what Europe is going to be moving into the future, European identity, and of course the threat of, or the so-called threat of Islam. And I think, you know, there's a lot of conservatives and neocons who openly profess that like the biggest threat to Western civilization is Islamic fundamentalism. And I think, yeah, he in time is, now he's utilizing that especially to play on that mostly subconscious fear of, you know, a so-called Muslim takeover of Europe. You know, this idea of, you know, diversity, the great replacement, and, you know, what is Europe going to be moving into the future. And it's definitely a testing area because there is a history to it, and there's arguably a future to it. And I guess that's where we'll start with the question of Turkey.
Yeah, so Turkey, nobody really knows if it's Western or in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Really. Geographically, it's both. It's kind of just... Istanbul is kind of cut in half.
Yep, yeah, there's the western side and the eastern side, yep.
Mm-hmm. One on the European continent and then the rest in Asia Minor. A lot of, at least Turkish people, see themselves as very Western, very apart from the Arab world.
Yeah.
Kind of just like ostracize them. They're proud of their Turkish language as opposed to being Arabic, you know, they make the big distinction. A lot of the at least more moderate Muslims see themselves as very progressive from the others, from the other compadres of the Arab world. So, you know, Turkey's kind of in the balance. And if you ask somebody like these people that Steve Bannon's gunning for, like, is Turkey in the West, their gut reaction is no, because the question at the end of the argument that they say is the culture. You know, the culture is different.
Yeah.
Even though it's very similar, you know, like, there's no requirement for head coverings and all of this. There's no, like, common clothing like that. A lot of my Turkish friends just dress normal clothes, and what we would perceive as very Western clothing.
Yeah.
A lot of that, what they're actually saying is that they're Muslim. So they're, you know, they're
Muslim and they're not white enough.
Exactly, not white enough.
Yeah.
They speak a weird language. It's not like I don't know, some random Balkan language. It's not Croat. It's not kind of close, but not too weird. That type of language. It's alienated. It's the other. Yeah. So that's kind of where they draw the line of the West.
Exactly, and it's this strange situation where, you know, you've got the question of Turkey and whether it's in Europe or not, and you know, this goes beyond just a kind of intellectual debate or like, oh, you know, a geographical question. In the coming decades, it's going to be a matter of policy and like tough decisions, because, you know, some of you listening may not know, but Turkey as a nation has been lobbying to become a member of the EU, or, you know, the European community, or, you know, whatever capacity it was in at the time, for the last 50 years. They've been at this. They've been putting in the work. They want to be a member of the EU, naturally, because of all the different economic benefits that would come with it. And this in itself has been this fear, this underlying fear of a Muslim takeover, to many may be confirmed in a future which has Turkey become an EU member. And it is something that is being considered, like even during the Brexit referendum. The fact that, even now, Turkey and the EU are openly in talks about it and trying to come to a solution surrounding it. And that topic of Turkey becoming a future EU member, like by 2040 or 2050, was utilized by the pro-Brexit camp as a means to getting out of the EU, because there is this fear, this idea of, you know, Turkey is this corridor from the Middle East into Europe or vice versa, and yes, there could be a future where if Turkey is a member of the EU, it could very quickly act as a corridor for Islam, or, you know, Central Asia and the Middle East, in the sense that, like, people from Syria and all these other places.
Oh my gosh, it's touching Syria.
Yes,
It's in Iraq.
You know what I mean? So, you know, they can, like,
scary places.
You know, they can walk along, they can migrate to Turkey, and then within like a few years or a decade or whatever, gain citizenship, and then once they're a Turkish citizen, they're an EU citizen, and then they can migrate to all the other parts of Europe.
It's the certification that these Syrians could become European.
Yep, and that was a similar threat that was going on with Germany and like Sweden and these other places. And not only that, but there's also the fact that, like, Turkey is a large country. It's no pushover. You know, economically, it's quite strong. It has quite a large population, not too far behind that of Germany. So there's also the fact that if Turkey were to become an EU member, it wouldn't just be any old member. It wouldn't be this situation where they're like, oh, we're just happy to be here. We're so thankful to be sitting on the table among all of our white brethren here. It's not going to be that situation. By default of their population size, they're going to have considerable influence in, like, the voting process, the number of representatives they have on their side, and that in turn is going to affect EU policy, and then that affects Europe. So there is the question of Turkey and how that's, like, somewhat of a seen as a feasible underlying fear for like Europe and a lot of the far right. And then there's the fact that this potential concern in the future, this is not this potential concern in the future of having Turkey as an EU member is also built on by Europe's past, and that's where we get to the Moors, the Moorish invasion, right?
Yeah, right. Like, I mean, to the ideologies of all of these alt-righters, the West grew independently. It was birthed from God and touched by nobody else. There was no mixing of cultures or anything. It was just like this pure virgin culture that was beautiful and sprouted democracy on its own. Like, it just democracy and amazing things like the printing press and the internet. Like, this is all because of the West. So thank you, the West. Not to mention that the entire Iberian Peninsula and even further than that was just taken over completely by the Moors.
Yep, for over half a millennium.
A long time for that to be happening. And it's weird because, when we talk about the Moors, it's it's very alien to a lot of these people to think that this Muslim caliphate could take over Europe and actually benefit
arguably
Spain and be a big influencer to the Spanish culture, the Iberian culture.
Yeah, help bring secularism to Spain. There's certain like crops and like types of trees and relating to horticulture that they helped introduce to the like country.
Architecture and art.
Yes, like so many different kind of innovations and changes that they helped bring forth, which surprisingly, shortly after they were exiled from Spain.
Spain went into the Dark Ages, like.
Well, no. I mean, Spain went into what was a golden age. This is where you get like.
Sorry, I got my dates wrong.
Yeah. This is where you get like Columbus and like
That was the same year. It was the same year that they kicked out the Moors that Christopher Columbus set sail.
Exactly. Christopher Columbus set sail, and then you had, for essentially like, I guess you could say up until maybe like the late 19th century, and maybe prior to the scramble for Africa, where you essentially had Spain kind of be the world hegemon.
Yeah. I mean, they owned everything south. And even parts of what is now the United States.
Yep. Yeah.
Pretty big chunk.
Yeah, and it just coincidentally happened after this period of like over half a millennia where they were ruled by those kind of like black-skinned Moorish bunches. But yeah, no connection whatsoever.
No connection. No. But if you ask about this certain type of history to alt-righters, like, that's just a blind spot.
Yeah.
It's just like, boom. They were just
blind
great.
Spot.
It was
Absolutely.
They just like fell out of the sky great. Like, I was born this way, man. Which is weird to think that like Europe in itself was this. It developed out of a vacuum, which really the interactions between, for example, Persia and Greece bringing about democracy, like that's just. If you ask some alt-righter where democracy is from, they wouldn't mention Persia and Cyrus the Great. It wouldn't be any of those things. And then, like, Alexander the Great growing up under the reign of a Persian ruler just being like, hey, guys, the Persians have this cool thing called democracy, so we should do it here.
And then, it even goes back to those other things like the phonetic alphabet, numbers, algebra, like Judeo Christianity.
Exactly. Right.
Hello, Middle East. Hello, Islam to some extent.
And just like all of the mythology of the religions in the Mediterranean Sea, undoubtedly although there was a lot of mixing, but it can be traced back to the Fertile Crescent.
Yep.
It can be traced back to like Mesopotamia, Babylonia.
Agriculture can be traced back to that. You know, the beginnings of that.
No, but
civilization.
No, because the alt-righters, they just see it as a vacuum, you know, just like white people were born out of a cloud and just created all of these things.
Yes.
Because we're perfect and no help from any other culture, any other, sorry, I'm using their language, any other race, any other ethnicity or continent altogether. It was just all of them. So, you know, they got this weird historical background to it. And it kind of plays into the bigger narrative of the othering that goes on, the outsider, which in this case is the culture, the antagonistic culture that's fighting against Western culture.
Yeah. And this is what Bannon and what a lot of the far right in Europe and, you know, a certain subsect of the European mainstream think that they're fighting against in terms of this Muslim takeover, and then there is that underlying fear in the fact that it has happened before, you know, and you know, you could tell there's an issue and we feel a type of way about it because it's something that's not spoken about. Like, fuck me, you do not hear. If you're even for those growing up in Europe, when I was in the UK, we were taught nothing about the Moorish invasion and control of Spain, Portugal, what is today Spain, Portugal, and certain parts of southern France.
No, even though, and you were the one who told me this, and it just fucking blew my mind in half. But Queen Elizabeth is somehow related to the Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah, there's
the Moors.
The real possibility surrounding that. Yeah,
there's just a fucking nuts to think about. And it's just like nobody talks about it. It's just like no, she's just the angelic, the wonderful Queen Elizabeth. You know, so pure and everything. And it's like she got Moorish blood.
Yeah,
how did that happen?
And, you know, it's just that type of thing of, you know, it's not spoken about because I feel like it's, you know, some sense of shame or insecurity. And then now I feel like these insecurities are being exposed and someone such as Bannon is capitalizing on that.
He is. He's doing a lot of the fear politics.
Yeah.
Because there is a fear economy to this.
Yeah.
You make obviously money off of it, but you also make political power out of this.
Yeah.
And he's also doing it in Brazil in kind of a different way with cultural Marxism.
Wow. And fuck me again, you see this situation where it's these different places. So the USA and Brazil are quite similar in that sense in terms of there's a fear of a black or non-white takeover. In a sense of like the demographics are going in one direction.
Yeah.
A change is in motion. Brazil is not a majority white country. It's a majority non-white country, and that was a milestone that was only passed very recently. And increasingly moving towards the future that is, you know, is going to increasingly become non-white, and again you're going to get another situation where it's like, oh, it's the fall of like Western civilization. Those
Brazil.
People there aren't going to be in control anymore. You see a similar thing happening in America where the USA is not too far behind Brazil, and Europe is still pretty white, but changes are also beginning to take place there, particularly in countries such as France, Germany, the UK, Scandinavian countries to some degree. Like, we are experiencing those like big demographic changes of our own, where they're getting
more visibly too. You know, in these big cities where it's more obvious that these changes are taking place.
London, majority of the population in London are not white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just, you know, that's wild to think about, and it's you can kind of see where people get the idea that they're being replaced.
Yeah.
You know, because like they'll just harken back to the good old days where they would just see like one black a month,
Yeah.
You know, like, or there was just a section of the town that was segregated off, that was cornered off, and that's where they all live.
Yeah.
But now, like, it's overrun. They've broke down the barriers, and now, oh my God, hide your kids, hide your wife, because these minorities are coming up and out.
Yeah. Kind of like what we were talking about before, where it's like, the changes are coming, and sooner or later it's going to be in your backyard, and it's like, how are you going to deal with that? And it's very interesting in the sense of like, I guess it leads us to somewhat of a conclusion in a way of like, you have certain portions of Europe and ideological certain people across the ideological spectrum, far right in particular, who are trying to push back against these changes. And for that, I pose this question to you, like, I don't know, you can't have your cake and eat it. Like, I would say, you want to point your finger at ethnically homogenous nations such as Japan and those close to home such as Hungary and Austria and Russia to some degree. But you have to kind of look, upon closer inspection, those nations in and of themselves are in decline. Their populations are declining, their economic growth is faltering, and that is in part because of their aging population. The fact that they're not being open to change and immigration and getting in young people to come in and work, who are able to work and actually pay taxes for the aging population. Right now, Europe is in a space where they're getting too many old people who aren't willing to continue working. They want to retire, and we need the young people to do the work. And it's just that thing of, okay, if you can keep Europe white and defend your civilization, but then when it all comes down to it, what are we going to have left to defend? Like, we can go in the direction of Poland and Hungary and Russia, but what are they? No offense to them, but they're in decline and they're not particularly relevant, and they're not thriving. They're like, so I would definitely hold on to that thought.
Right, and that brings us to the end of another Two Tims Talking Trash. This time we tackled Steve Bannon.
Sloppy Steve.
We owned him.
Steve Bannon, fear of Islam.
Consider yourself owned, Sloppy Steve.
Yep, and just say before we end off on this, just think of, what do you want Europe to be in the future, and what do you want out of that? Those are the two key, clear questions to ask, because the answers to them may be different for each of those ones. That's all I'm going to say.
All right. Well, so if you have any comments or something, of course, leave them. You can share, subscribe, follow us on whatever platform you're using.
Yep.
We'll be in touch. Thanks for listening.
Bang, bang.
Thank you.